class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing some more Evander Kane news. And for many Sharks fans, this is going to be some very good news, as it was just a couple of days ago that Evander Kane was placed onto unconditional waivers for the purpose of terminating his contract. And just yesterday, he cleared those unconditional waivers and officially became an unrestricted free agent. And so for a player who many thought the Sharks would either have to trade while retaining half of his contract and as such be charged $3.5 million for the rest of this year and 3 years after that for having no player play, or many people thought maybe he'd have to even get bought out during this offseason, which would charge anywhere between $2 and $4 or even $5 million on the cap over the next 6 years, the Sharks have seemingly gotten out of with $0 charged against the cap for any amount of years. Now, how exactly did this happen? Because with all the drama this past offseason with Evander Kane, including the violating the NHL's COVID protocol by allegedly having a fake vaccination card, his biggest consequence was being suspended 21 games. And don't get me wrong, a 21-game suspension would be massive if it was doled out to a player who was actually going to play games. For instance, if the Edmonton Oilers had gotten Connor McDavid suspended for 21 games, that would pretty much tank their entire season. But since Evander Kane wasn't going to play games with the San Jose Sharks anyway, him getting suspended 21 games is no different from him just getting a slap on the wrist from the NHL. But now it seems as though he has violated the AHL COVID protocols by allegedly having traveled to Vancouver while being COVID positive, and that was enough to break the camel's back. That was the final straw that broke the camel's back. It's likely that when he did violate those NHL COVID protocols and they gave him the 21-game suspension, there was also a message that that was sort of his last chance, and he kind of had to keep his head down if he wanted to be able to maintain this contract. But with also violating COVID protocols of even a different league, not just the NHL, but also the AHL, it seems as though the Sharks were finally allowed to terminate his contract. And like I said, yesterday he officially became an unrestricted free agent. Having said that, the San Jose Sharks are not completely out of the woods because of an organization called the NHLPA, the Players Association for National Hockey League players. And even though Evander Kane might not be deserving of this type of defense, what kind of player association would the NHLPA be if they didn't try and sort of save Evander Kane in this situation? So they have, of course, filed a grievance against the Sharks and the National Hockey League, and I guess we're going to see what ends up coming out of that. It may seem as though that he broke all of these rules, and so it's a pretty easy ruling of just saying, yeah, they could terminate his contract, but things aren't that crystal clear when it comes to the law like this, as we just have to go back a few years ago when a somewhat similar situation occurred when the Los Angeles Kings tried to terminate Mike Richards' contract. Now, Richards, his transgressions were not anything like the transgressions that Evander Kane did, a very different situation that I'm not going to get into here, but they tried to terminate his contract. The NHL Players Association stepped in, and what ended up being the ruling is that the Los Angeles Kings still had to have Mike Richards a small, very small cap hit, but affecting them over the next dozen or so years from when that situation actually happened. For instance, the Kings actually are still charged with $900,000 against the cap this season because of the Mike Richards situation. Now, it ended up being much better than if they had to just buy out Mike Richards, so even if a somewhat similar situation were to occur with Evander Kane, it would probably still be favorable to having to trade him and retain salary or buy him out. But just to say that the result of this situation might not be super perfect for the San Jose Sharks. They might not be completely out of the woods. Having said all this, what is next for the future for Evander Kane? Well, of course, his career for the San Jose Sharks is completely done with, but now as an unrestricted free agent, he has the ability to sign with any other team, and you might think that the teams might not be willing to sign a player who has such a bad reputation and has broken so many rules, but we know that teams are desperate to win. Like I pointed out in my previous Evander Kane video, teams would be willing to take a chance on him for cheap, and the fact that they can sign him for a one-year deal when it's just the rest of this season for something like $1 or $2 million is very attractive to a lot of teams that are trying to make a playoff push, because we cannot forget that Evander Kane is a 30-goal, 60-point scorer, and while, even a team like the San Jose Sharks who were struggling offensively weren't willing to put him into the lineup because of the negative attitude he brought to the locker room, coming to a completely new team, teams would be willing to take that risk. We just saw this past offseason the Carolina Hurricanes sign Tony DeAngelo on the cheap, and many people thought that was a crazy move, but now he's been working out quite well with the Hurricanes. There's no real drama there, and while some people are still upset about that situation, it's kind of moved on from that point. So while I'm sure there will be a lot of noise made when Evander Kane, I guess I could say if Evander Kane does sign with another NHL team, if it ends up working out, many of those teams' fans will probably forget about any drama surrounding him and be happy and maybe even sort of try to justify it in their mind that, clearly the veteran leadership in our locker room seemed to tame him and make him work well with the team. No matter the case, if he does well, fans are going to be happy. And so while his future is still kind of blurry, the one thing that is for sure is that he is done as a San Jose Shark. Class dismissed.